wants to join, that's another location for them.
Okay.
I just hit the go live button, and so it'll take about 30 seconds
Okay.
for it to get there.
Okay. Just tell me when, and then we'll go.
Okay. And exit out of there. There. Okay. Yep. We're live streaming. I'm watching it on one, and we're good here.
Okay, we will go ahead and call to order the April 13th Franklin City Schools Board of Education work session. Dr. Sander, I'm not sure who's calling the roll.
I'll take care of that.
That would be
Mr.
great.
Nipper? Present. Mr. Sizemore?
Oh, he's muted still. We're good
Yeah,
now.
I'm here. Sorry.
Mrs. Raleigh? Here. Mr. Fleming?
I'm here.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger?
Here. All right, and now if you will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll have a graphic go up.
And okay, everybody should be able to see, and you can, yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Standing, pledge allegiance to the flag of the
Of the United States of America,
and
to the republic
To the republic
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
All right, thanks, everybody. Now we will go to adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions before we proceed?
Yes, I would like to add item 4L, and that would be a board resolution concerning the Executive Order 2020-01D, which is the governor's executive order dealing with the coronavirus.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sander. Are there any motions to adopt the agenda as amended? That Mr. Nipper, and second,
Second,
Mr. Sizemore? Okay,
yes.
all right, Dr. Sander?
Mr. Nipper? Yes. Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh?
Yes, I can't hear Rachel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have recognition of guests and public participation. So Amy is helping us with that.
There's two of us watching. So looks like none. That's all I'm seeing. Nobody's in the comments, so I think we're okay.
Okay, we will move on to the technology update from Amy and Craig.
Okay, I am going to share my screen with everybody. Here, and here we go. Okay. So usually around this time of year, Craig and I come in to just talk about the one-to-one program and the device selection and the interactive panels. Just so you guys are aware, we're going to keep it kind of short as much as possible. We'll start off with device selection for the one-to-one program. It's actually the exact same device that we recommended last year. It's a Lenovo Chromebook. It's the 100Es. It's for 7th and 9th graders. It's roughly about 250 devices that we order per grade with the same info case that's always on. And one of the reasons why we're sticking, I think, with the same one is that we've had better success with this one than we have in the past few years in terms of with breakage rates. Students seem to be happy. Staff seems to be happy. We ran it by Cortec like we usually do. They really liked the cases this year that we went with because literally they're always on and there's a strap There's a way that the kids can put their chargers also in the cases. It's been a much better product, I think, overall than what we have had in the last few years. We're really happy with this one, so we weren't going to make any changes. Craig, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think that it's easier if they need to remove the case for any reason. They're not going to risk breaking the screen like they have been with the shells that we've had in the past. So yeah, this case is definitely a better option.
And then the interactive panels, these are what are replacing the smart boards that we've done. We're in phase 3 of this particular project that we've been working on. That first year we did the high school and Hunter. Last year we did Skank and Gerke, I believe. Yes.
Yes, Skank and Gerke.
And then we'd like to this summer do Pennyroyal and Anthony Wayne, and last year we included some professional development hours from their actual trainers in our request for proposals. In that it helped our staff out a lot for some things, because there were some major changes that happened over the summer with that particular board, and their actual trainers were able to help us during August a lot more than what has happened in the past. So it's the same board. It's the 65-inch that goes up on the wall just to replace the smart board. And this would leave us then with replacing boards in all of the buildings with the exception of the junior high in the last, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not sure when Hampton Bennett was done in the last, 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, well, Hampton Bennett was done probably 5 years ago with a different type of interactive panel. They have the Sharp panels. So at some point after the junior high, we'll probably have to swing back around to Hampton Bennett and replace those because they're probably the next ones in line to be replaced.
And all of this
I
is,
say-
oh, good.
I do just want to say that for the board that remember these interactive panels can be taken and moved to new buildings. Also, both of these items are currently in the proposed budget for next year for the technology department.
Yeah, the money is already, it's in the proposed budget, the proposed technology budget. So we're not asking for additional money. It's when Craig and I do our budgets in the spring, we've been planning out several years. We always plan out several years ahead.
Yeah, we have a 5-year cycle, and for the next 5 years, we've allocated enough money to replace the boards for the next few years, as well as teacher stations.
And then the last piece actually includes the acceptable use policy. I know we made some fairly major changes to it last year to update the fee structure. This year, the acceptable use policy, no changes. It's still, there's nothing that we would need to change or even look at. The only thing is we also have our elementary students also now sign the one-to-one policy for Chromebooks, because we have enough in the district. They're not take home, but 6th graders this year all were issued a device assigned just to them. And in some buildings, we even had enough to do 5th and 4th grade. There was one change to those, which is just, where's that at? Is just to reflect intentional damage. Oh, this was the only line that we were looking at adding, is just if any repairs were the result of intentional damage by students, i.e. something for the example like punching screens, students face disciplinary action along with the full price of repairs versus just the other time when they have like the flat fee that's 25 and 10 and 5. We have had several issues at the junior high this past year, and after conversations with the principals, that when they were intentional, that they wanted to charge them that full amount. So that's the only thing that we were looking at to bring to the board in terms of changing the forms, is just adding that line if it's intentional. So which is to be determined by the principal, the administration. That's not something that our department gets involved in because it's a disciplinary piece. So it's determined whether or not it's intentional by, the administration when they meet with the student and the parents.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how many we've had this year, and it was warranted to actually put it in the AUP. We had probably 6 or 7 incidences where we had intentional damage, and principals asked us what we need to do. So this just kind of highlights it in writing so they can actually sign it, and they're aware of it going into it.
Questions about that?
I guess I have a quick question or comment. I assume that's consistent with other policies we have about property damage, is it not? Like if there's,
Typically, like any other vandalism, usually when we deal with discipline, there is a school discipline, but there's also that they must reimburse the district for the expenses. So this change in the AUP would correspond with the other disciplines that we.
okay, thanks.
Yep. So, nope, not the flag. We don't want to be looking at the flag.
Okay, what we would need from the board would be permission to go ahead and put out a RFP for the devices and the interactive panels. And then I would need to know if it's okay to bring the AUP back on the agenda for approval on the 27th.
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For
Okay.
both the RFPs and the agenda. Thank you.
All right, and now we will move on to the update from Mr. McFarland, Special Education.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody. And you all should have a copy of this. It was an attachment to the Word docs. Amy, is it showing up okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you to the board for letting me present tonight. I just wanted to recap you all about where we stand at the end of this school year. I know even despite the closure, we're beginning to wrap things up and get a count of where we are to end the year. So I wanted to do that, and I wanted to provide you projections of where we stand for next year. And then off of that, some recommendations and implications based on those projections. So I'm going to go through both the recap of this year and projections for next year. And then if you have questions, feel free to stop me as we go through this. And like I said, you should all have a copy of this, but this is the same presentation that you had. So first, just the recap portion. I'm going to talk about both personnel of where we stand and students. So on the personnel side, and this is very similar to where we were last year on intervention specialists. The district currently employs 31.5 positions. That half position is actually at Pennyroyal. We also have an additional 3 intervention specialist positions that are contracted through the Warren County ESC. They fulfill tier 3 placements, 1 at the junior high and 2 at the high school. So other than those 3 ISs, the rest of the intervention specialists throughout the district are Franklin City School employees. Paraprofessionals, we currently employ 33 paraprofessionals or classroom aides. These are one-to-one aides, floating aides, which are assigned to entire buildings, or servicing our tier 3 or tier 2 classrooms. There are an additional 6 aides that work in our district that are Warren County ESC employees. They service the 3 tier 3 classrooms, 2 at the high school, 1 at the junior high. So those junior high and high school classrooms, those are units totally housed with Warren County ESC employees. School psych, we have 2.6 positions. 2 of those are full-time Franklin City School employees. We have a 0.6 position Actually, it's a 0.8 right now for this school year. It was a 0.6 prior. But that 0.8 position is 4 days a week. That's where that 0.6 or 0.8 comes from. So if you imagine 1 day a week is a 0.2. So once again, that should say 0.8 because we have a 4 day a week psych position. That's a Warren County ESC position. Speech and language pathologists, 3.8. So 3 of those are full-time Franklin City School employees. And then we have a 0.8 position, 4 days a week. That's actually filled by several different individuals, all of which were our ESC employees. All of our OT-PT, which is 5.2 positions, are contracted through the ESC. We have a transition coordinator that works 1 day a week, also an ESC employee. A transition coordinator, if you're not familiar, this position assists specifically our junior and senior identified students in their transitions out of school, high school, into the post-secondary world. There's a lot of agencies to coordinate through that process. So the transition coordinator helps us through that. And that's presently paid for through a grant through the Warren County Board of DD. The collaborative behavior coach, this was a position we added this year. The collaborative behavior coach works 3 days a week in the district, assisting both individual students and teachers in the classroom setting, dealing with students that may present behaviors that get in the way of their academic progress. But these are students that remain within the district, but the collaborative behavior coach assists that student, the family, and the teachers in making sure that that student can mitigate those behaviors and still be successful. And that is also funded through a grant with the Warren County Board of DD. And finally, we have 2 hearing impaired interpreters. These are full-time positions contracted through the ESC. They actually work with 2 students at the junior high. Those students will be 8th graders, 2 twins actually. And those interpreters sign to the students, and they're embedded with those students throughout the day. And those interpreters have been assigned to those students for a number of years. Any questions before I move on in terms of personnel and where we stand? So as you see, it is a mix between Franklin City School employees and Warren County ESC. Students, this is where we are right now. And I say right now because, as Dr. Sander knows, this number can change daily. Honestly, things have been pretty stable right now because we haven't had a lot of move-ins or move-outs given the closure. But right now, our students with disability, that is the SWD acronym that you will see, stands at 593. So we have 593 students that are identified with one type or more of disability. That is 22% of our student population. If you want some comparison, the state average is 15%. So we are well above the state average when it comes to identified students in terms of our overall general population. We have 375 students that receive what we call Tier 1 support or Tier 1 placement. That simply means that they spend the vast majority or 80% or more of their time in the gen ed setting, and they receive either push-in or pull-out support from an intervention specialist, and maybe in a resource room, but maybe within the classroom. So these are students that are fully integrated in their classes, but they do receive special education services because they are identified. Typical identification for these students would be OHI, specifically students that suffer from ADHD or specific learning disability. Those are the 2 main categories for Tier 1 placement. Tier 2 placement, we have 29 students at the elementary level. So we have two Tier 2 classrooms, both located at Pennyroyal. These students spend still the majority of their time out in the gen ed setting, but they receive their core math and ELA instruction within a resource room. Typically, they are performing significantly below grade level and need that extra support and modified curriculum that a Tier 2 classroom provides. And that is housed with 1 intervention specialist and 2 paras in each of those 2 Tier 2 classrooms. Tier 3 placement, if you remember at the elementary level, we actually added a Tier 3 classroom for this year. So we have 61 students in a Tier 3 placement. And once again, this is K through 12. And I'm going to highlight that in a little bit here, but we have 61 students in that placement. These students spend the majority of their time within the resource room. They still go out to varying degrees, at least for one class, but typically for more. Throughout the district, we really push for integration of all students, even for those students that have multiple disabilities or more pronounced disabilities. So even in a tier 3 placement, those students are not isolated in those classrooms for the entire day, but they do receive the bulk of their core instruction. They are performing significantly below grade level and have pretty pronounced academic, behavioral, social, emotional needs. Alternative placement, we do have 30 students placed outside of the district. These are students that might be at the Warren County Learning Center, Social Communication Classroom, which specifically deals with pronounced disabilities and pretty significant autism. We do have some students in the Social Communication Classroom. And as I said, the Learning Center. Also, John Lazarus Alternative School would also fall under the alternative placement. So we do have 30 students in that placement category. We have 18 students currently receiving John Peterson or Autism Scholarship. So these are students that live within Franklin City Schools, but they do not attend one of our schools. Instead, they attend a private provider or a parochial school, and they finance that through the John Peterson or Autism Scholarship. I still include them in our numbers though, because we are still responsible for writing those IEPs, even though they don't attend a school within our district. We do have 44 students that are receiving only speech services. So that is their only disability, speech and language impairment, and they do not receive any other services. So I do count them separately because they don't have an intervention specialist that serves as their case manager. And we have 36 identified students at the Warren County Career Center. I count them separate because the Warren County Career Center, once they go to the Career Center, that the Warren County Career Center writes those IEPs. I serve as district rep in those meetings, so they still definitely have a connection to Franklin, but the Career Center writes those. The only students that are not included in that 593, just so you're aware, is preschool. So we do have 52 preschoolers that are identified that I don't include in that number because I'm only talking about K through 12 services. And then I just put that graphically there for you to see percentages. So you can see the vast majority of our students are in tier 1, 2, or 3 placements. This is a projections for next year. So that was a recap of where we are at the end of the year, and this is where we're going. So this table, I just sort of break it down for you building by building. Some things I just want to point out to you though. Obviously, Pennyroyal houses our 2 tier 2 classrooms at the elementary level. That's why that number is there, and it doesn't exist in any other school because those classrooms are only at Pennyroyal. And that is by design because we want those students to be able to stay in the same school when they progress academically through the grades. Gerke Elementary houses our 4 tier 3 classrooms. That is also by design, and we redesigned that a couple years ago. There's a tier 3 classroom also at the ECC at the kindergarten level. And as I said, 1 at the junior high and 2 at the high school. So you can see broken down, our elementaries are fairly consistent. If you look at that, it's pretty remarkable how consistent they are. Obviously next year, remember this is all projections, next year Pennyroyal is substantially lower than the other elementaries. That's partially because this year there's a very large identified 6th grade, and obviously they'll be progressing to the junior high, but otherwise pretty consistent across the board. And once again, these are projections. And just so you know, this 463 number, remember this is only including students that are tier 1, 2, or 3 placement. It doesn't include those other categories I mentioned prior. And we will, just for your reference, we will end the year projected, including just these kids, at 465. So we'll have 465 students across grade levels within these tiers. My projection though is we'll start the year at 463. So please keep in mind, while that number is 2 less, your year always starts with the lowest number here. And as we move through the year, we have initial evaluation. So that number only grows. So the fact that we're starting the year with only 2 less students that are identified is a sign that we do have some needs. So I'm gonna talk about that later on.
Jim?
Yes.
Also, we're a little bit behind because we have people in the pipeline that are supposed to have the initial evaluation, and that's been put on hold due to the schools being closed. So realistically, we do have a good number in the pipeline ready to already put that number higher.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sander. That is absolutely true. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit, but that is absolutely true. Because of the closure, that has delayed some initial evaluations, which I'm going to get into why that is. One other way of just seeing our numbers for next year is just by grade level. Obviously, this isn't broken down by building, but just to give you a sense of what our curve looks like. I want you to note 9th grade. We have 57 9th graders. This is next year, remember, so current 8th graders that are identified. So it's a large group. But you can see this natural climb. This isn't unusual. As students progress through the elementary, that number does go up as we begin to see struggles and may lead to certain identifications and evaluations. We do have some kids drop off. Perhaps they don't need those supports anymore and they exit special education as they move through elementary, and that gives you this. But also I will say our numbers have grown ever since the 3rd grade guarantee. So that provision, so in special ed law, you can excuse a student who's identified from the consequences of the 3rd grade guarantee in terms of retention. So unsurprisingly, we have had a large number of families that are aware of that, and they will request evaluations. It doesn't mean that every student that gets an evaluation automatically qualifies. They don't. We do evaluations and find students that do not qualify for special education, but we do find others that do. But that 3rd grade guarantee really has driven numbers upward, just to be perfectly honest and transparent. Just another way of viewing it, you can just see, once again, broken down by building. Obviously, the high school is the largest. That's not a surprise, given this is the building where all 9 through 12 students within the district are housed. Junior high also very large compared to our elementaries. And obviously the tiers are reflected there. Pennyroyal having the tier 2, Gerke having the tier 3. So looking at projections for tier 1 services, for this, I'm only looking at tier 1. So these are our students who have a case manager of an IS. This is not our tier 2 or tier 3 students. So once again, if you look here, very consistent across the board, except for Pennyroyal, as I noted before. And just to show you some changes here. So remember that we are projecting next year, and this is compared to where we'll end the year. So the ECC, we will start the year with 1 fewer identified student than we're ending. That's a sign that we have a large identified population at the preschool age that'll be coming up, just to note that, okay? So Anthony Wayne and Gerke have slight dips. They'll start the year with slightly less numbers. Hunter actually will start with the same number. They have very few 6th graders that are identified advancing to the junior high, and they have a number of kindergartners that are currently identified this year that will be moving up to 1st grade. So actually they will start the year like they will end it. As I said, Pennyroyal is down due to that large 6th grade number going to the junior high. Skank also has a drop there. The junior high has a drop of 14 net. And that's partially because of that 8th grade, 9th grade group that's moving up. So you can see the high school is gaining 34 students that are identified. That's a net gain. So that's a lot, just to put it in perspective there. And one IS caseload at the high school is 24, to put that in perspective. So I'm going to come back to that issue. So this leads to some staffing recommendations as we move into the next year, which I'd like the board to consider. The first deals with our speech language pathologists. And this has come about when I met with the ESC to talk about next year's services. So I'm going to walk us through where we are. I noted in the beginning of the presentation that our current staffing is 3 full-time Franklin City School employees in that 0.8 position, 4-day a week, contracted through the ESC. What I am proposing is for next year is that we go to 4 full-time positions, all Franklin City School employees. So basically getting rid of the 0.8 position and adding that to our district staff. Why am I doing that, or why am I advising that we do this? we can actually increase services by 1 day a week. So it's adding 37 days throughout the year. And by making this position a Franklin City School employee, we can actually save $19,401.19. So it is cheaper for us to hire a full-time SLP than to contract 4 days a week through the ESC for next year. So I didn't know that until I sat down with the ESC to talk about services 2 weeks ago. So I did want to bring that to the board's attention. Additional notes that I want to put on your radar. We do have an SLP that is retiring at the end of this year. So Cindy Banks is retiring. There is a hire recommendation on the board agenda to replace her. Just wanted to put out that there is savings in that new hire when compared to Cindy, and that's a savings of $25,500. So the recommendation there is to move that 0.8 to a full-time Franklin City School employee. The school psychs, and presently, and once again, I apologize, that should be a 0.8 because that is a 4-day-a-week position. So presently, we have a 2.8 psychs within the district, 2 Franklin City School employees, and a 0.8 ESC position. If you remember, the board previously had approved moving that 0.8 contracted position to a full-time Franklin City School position. And honestly, that was a revenue neutral move. By making that a full-time Franklin City School position as opposed to the 0.8, it would pretty much broke even. And there is a recommendation for that position later on in the board agenda. We did do interviews for that, and there is a recommendation for that hire. But what I'm proposing, moving beyond this, and honestly, this is coming about as a reflection, partially driven by the closure. So the 2020-21 staffing proposal when it comes to psychs includes adding an additional 0.6 or 3-day-a-week Franklin City School position. And this comes about for a number of reasons. Adding that 0.6 position will represent a proactive step in response to the closure. Dr. Sander alluded to the fact that because of the closure, we have not been able to conclude a number of initial evaluations. Through right now, if you count the 6 weeks that we will be closed through the end of April, we will not be able to conclude 10 initial evaluations. The bright side is we've been able to do every IEP meeting. We've been able to do every reevaluation. The staff has worked really hard to keep us in compliance with that. But statewide, there is the issue with initials. To conduct an initial evaluation, you have to do face-to-face assessment with kids. We can't do that right now because of the health orders. So our psychs cannot meet one-on-one with students to do evaluations. We cannot get up-to-date information as a result of the closure. So all of that said, this will help us fix that problem because we are going to have a backlog when we come back, whether it's in May or whether it's in the fall. So the step there is to be proactive about addressing that closure and that initial evaluation issue. I've also alluded to this in the past, but it will better align us to operating standards the state has. The state says that you should have 1 psych per 125 identified students. If we added the 0.6, we would be 1 per 164. So still high, but much better than where we have been in the past. It would reduce reevaluation caseloads throughout the department. It would reduce the amount of reevaluations next year that each psych would have to do, which would allow them more time to do the initials that have been backed up and the initials that we will have moving forward. It will reduce the number of buildings each psych is covering. If we added a 0.6 position, no psych would cover more than 3 buildings, and that has profound implications for a number of the bullets found below. It would provide all school psychs greater ability to complete the unfinished initials. It would prevent diminished ability to complete new requests that we get next year. Because if we did not increase staffing, we'd have to do the initials that were not finished first. And then we'd have to turn to the new evaluations that we will get next year. So this would help mitigate that problem. It would also diminish the need for a sub-psych service. So we will have a school psych presently employed that is going on maternity leave. I did not know that a few months ago. So we will have to hire a sub-psych to fill that maternity leave. If we add the 0.6, there is savings there because the psych that would be going on leave would have less buildings to cover and less reevaluations to complete. Therefore, I would be able to have less days that I need the sub, which I'll talk about in a moment. It would also allow for the development of a more robust response to intervention framework. Robin has been working really, really hard district-wide to really shore up our response to intervention, which has been inconsistent across buildings. And to really make RTI successful, we need school psychs there. We need them in those meetings to help us develop interventions for kids before they even get to the evaluation. Because if we can mitigate the students at that stage, maybe we prevent an evaluation from even happening. It would also increase the ability of psychs to assist in the development of interventions, as I stated. So it would help teachers develop academic interventions for kids even before an evaluation is necessary. And finally, it would increase the ability of psychs to provide mental, emotional services and supports. Part of the psych's job, if you look at their job description statewide, is to help provide these mental, emotional supports. Honestly, we can't do that right now because our psychs are so embedded and their time is dominated by doing evaluations. But if some of that was taken off their plate, this part could be increased. And if they were only covering 2 to 3 buildings, they would become integral in helping provide those services. So it's not that we are really diminishing the workload of these psychs. What we would be doing is shifting it from simply doing evaluations only to really servicing our kids in other ways, which I think would have profound implications and would really assist our kids moving forward. So that is the psych proposal. I'm going to come back to this in my summary. So if you can field any questions at that point regarding that. Some cost benefits. So the 0.6 3-day a week, it would cost an estimate to the district $48,000, $48,590. If we contracted through the ESC instead of hiring, it would cost us $71,000. So that's not really cost efficient to contract the position through the ESC, because I did look at that to see if that was better for us. There are some offsets. I would reduce the sub costs by $8,400. And I also would apply, and I feel I have high likelihood to get a grant through the Warren County Board of DD in the amount of $20,000. Here's why I think that. The 0.6 position would be concentrated at the preschool kindergarten building and would service a lot of those initial identifications. The Warren County Board of DD really focuses on benefits and services to young students, especially preschool. They have told us that before. That's one of the reasons why we were able to get the playground equipment, because we were catering to that younger demographic. So I really think that if I could sell a psych that's going to focus specifically on the Hampton Bennett Early Childhood Center, that would be a benefit there. So there are some offsets there that would help us mitigate the costs. Also, remember, we do have some savings coming from the SLP, approximately $20,000 if we hired instead of contracting for that full-time position that's currently a 0.8 position. Intervention specialists. Some recommendations: maintain elementary and junior high staffing levels. We're good there. We might need to reallocate across buildings, but the overall number can stay the same, and we'd be able to service our kids appropriately next year. However, I am recommending that we add an intervention specialist at the high school. As I stated, we have 18 12th graders that will be graduating. They're identified. We have 52 incoming 9th graders. And remember, this is tier 1, so I'm subtracting the tier 3 kiddos. That's a net increase of 34 identified 9th graders. And we cannot absorb that with our current staffing. It just doesn't work in terms of caseload. The state caps our caseload at 24 at the high school level, and they're already near capacity and adding 34 would put us way over that caseload. I also have looked at trying to move existing staff up to the high school. It also doesn't work. Anytime I move a position up to the high school, it brings me over caseload maximums at the other buildings. So I did look at that. I will note that if we added an intervention specialist at the high school, we have had 6 ISs at the high school before. We would actually be restoring where we were 2 years ago, where we reduced a position. So we do constantly, and I do try every year to look, what do we need and what don't we need? And I make decisions and recommendations based on that to the board. But we have had 6 ISs at the high school. That is not unprecedented. And obviously the cost is hard to determine. It's simply determined by the applicant that, that was hired for that potential position. So in summary on the recommendations there, I wanted to propose we create 1 Franklin City School SLP position that replaces a contracted position through the Warren County ESC. Create a 0.6 school psych position, which would be new. That's a 3-day-a-week position. And create 1 intervention specialist position at the high school. So my next slide is asking for questions, but I'll just leave it on this screen and I'll field any questions the board has about everything I've gone over, because I know it's a lot.
I mean, honestly, Jim, I don't have any questions. I mean, you laid it out, very effectively. And it sounds like the first 2, the SLP and the psych, is going to be a wash almost if you get that grant. So really the cost would be in the intervention specialist at a high school is what it looks like. So.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, if you combine the cost savings from the sub, for the psych and the grant and the savings on that first SLP position, switching the first bullet there, yeah, it does come out to be a wash. We do have some unrealized savings right now with the change in SLP. Obviously you always get that when you have retirees who are at the max of the pay scale and replaced by people that are not. So we do have some savings there, but I don't really know if it's always fair to count that as savings to add a new position. But yes, that would be an additional cost to add that position.
All right. Do we have any other questions or concerns?
Jim, you said we would be net adding 34 at the high school. Is the 1 position enough if they can handle a caseload of 24?
Yes, it is. And I've done all the numbers. It would reduce us to caseloads to about 21. That's where we have been historically. And honestly, that gives us some room for move-ins, because and one thing that I was always in the back of my head is, I don't know what this closure is going to do to numbers in terms of transient. I mean, we're going to have families that move in and move out. It most likely will be a wash, but this gives us some room to absorb any new students that move in. I will also say the issue isn't always caseload numbers too, it's coverage. And I know Kelly could really speak to this, but it's not just being at state minimums in terms of staffing. It's, do we have the staffing to support the students at the high school? They're in classrooms, and we got to make sure we have the staffing that can support them in going into those classrooms also. So it's a numbers game, certainly with caseloads, but it's also a numbers game in terms of the master schedule and making sure we have proper coverage to support these kids, because we want them to be successful in these classes. We don't want them just to be in the classes. So
I did finish up the master schedule today for next year. Obviously it's not perfect, but it's close to done. And I did it with the possibility of having the 6 intervention specialists. And it does allow us more support in English, especially since we lost that 6th position 2 years ago. We haven't had a lot of support in our junior and senior English classes. And I'll be able to do that again next year. We're also gonna be able to add some resource classes and have more support in science and social studies. So I don't have anything from a special ed perspective on the master schedule not covered for next year with 6 ISs.
Thanks, Kelly. But yes, Chris, to your question, it would absolutely set us up to be successful next year. We would not have any staffing issues. It would definitely be enough.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, Mr. McFarland. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. I
Is that
appreciate
okay
it.
then, Ms. Wolfenberger, is that okay to go ahead and create those positions?
I'm sorry, Dr. Sander, what was that?
Is that okay then to go ahead and tell Jim to proceed with creating the positions, working the interview and so forth?
I'm sorry, for some reason you're breaking up quite a bit. Are you asking, is it okay to go ahead and give him permission to create those positions?
Correct, yes, interview and so forth.
Hey,
Okay.
Dr. Sander, can I suggest something?
Please,
If-
because I don't know where my microphone is.
Well, you could switch to phone audio rather than use the microphone on your camera. And if you want to try it, to do it, you just go down to where your mute button is, and there's a little arrow in between the mute and the stop video. And if you click on it, it says you can switch to phone audio, and then you can just dial in with your phone and then put in a code, and then you're talking with your phone rather than through the computer. Might be a little clearer for everybody else.
Okay. I have to, it'll take me a second to do that.
Well, Dr. Sander, while you're working on that, does anybody on the board have any objections to that? I mean, I think that's something that we need to do, just to be in compliance, and do what's best for the kids.
I agree, Rachel.
All right. Great. Dr. Sander, are you okay to keep going?
Yes,
Okay. All right, so it sounds like that would be a go then, yes.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and next up, we have an ESL presentation from Mrs. Denisi.
Yes, I'm going to be sharing my screen. Thank you to the board for allowing me to present this evening on our English learners. And I'll just wait just a moment to make sure that my April 13th, 2020 screen is visible by all.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, as you know, I've been keeping you updated over the last couple of years. When I came on board in August of 2018, we had 6 English language learners in the district. Currently, we have 27 English language learners in the district, and that number is not going down. Let me see if I can move forward. What brings me to the board this evening, Eleanor Gilmore has done a fantastic job over many years being our English language tutor. And in August of 2018, this is what I sent you today in a separate email, because when I was checking board docs, for whatever reason, this wasn't opening. But this past August, ODE put this qualification for teachers providing English or language instruction educational programming for English learners. And here is the real crux of the situation. When we look at paragraph 2, now there are a teacher has to be a licensed TESOL and bilingual education teacher. They can get that in a couple of different ways, and it outlines the supplemental licensure, and if you're a supplemental, it's valid for 1 year, and then everything you have to do to secure a supplemental license. I reached out to Butler County ESC and Hamilton County ESC, and we get just a little over $1,000 in Title III funds. Title III is for English language learners. And I forward that to Hamilton County, because then I can get all the professional development I need for English language learner, for our teachers that teach them. And plus I get Connie Reyes-Rao, who is her along with Heidi Messinger. They are the gurus down in Hamilton County to help me stay compliant with what I have to be able to do for English language learners. We have been just doing the best we could up until now that Insights is getting larger. So I wanted to share that with you. Let's see if I can click back out of that. I have other things that hit my screen. Just a moment. That's preventing me from getting back into my presentation. So I I reached out to Eleanor. I checked her licensure back in the fall. She has a 712 permanent license in ELA. She has done EL tutoring for us, Dayton Public, and many others. I talked to Hamilton County about why, you know, how can I stay forward with Eleanor? Why is she able to be a tutor in other districts? Why is this posing a problem for me? I could keep Eleanor as an English tutor with just that certification if I had a TESOL endorsed teacher that she was reporting to, and I don't. So someone who is not TESOL licensed, supplemental license endorsement, I should say, can work under a teacher that is. Talk to Eleanor about pursuing that. Eleanor is, she has been retired now for quite some time. She shared her age with me, but I'm not going to share. I'll just say she's quite a bit older than I. For her to be able to get that, she would need to take 6 college classes, not 6 credit hours. She would need 18 college credit hours, 6 classes. She would need to sit for an assessment, and that would be for her to get the endorsement on her license. She's not interested in doing that. So I talked to her first about that. So my next thing was, well, let's take a look. Oops, sorry. But let's look at her certification. I reached out to the Ohio Department of Education, the Lau Center, which is the hub for everything EL. I communicated with Eleanor. We already had her on contract when this came out in August, but I met with Eleanor in February, I believe it was, of this year, and asked would she be interested in doing these things, and she said no. So my next state was to what do we need? And so I already have shared with you what this slide says. So I reached out. I asked Hamilton County, I'm going to need, and I asked for a full-time TESOL teacher. Eleanor teaches 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We increased her by 1 day, but we have a lot of students that we have that we say that we are monitoring. Many of those students are high school students. They're still getting 2s on the OELPA. They have not tested out the OELPA, but they tend to hold their own a little bit better than our youngsters. So we have kind of done a triage, for lack of a better word, to keep that contract down to 3 days a week and allow her to monitor others. I went to the Warren County ESC. I asked them how much it would cost to have a full-time TESOL endorsed teacher, and they gave me the cost of $88,800. That was from Christy Even. This figure came from Connie Reyes-Rao, Hamilton County ESC. So I did some auditing of our personnel files. If knowing that I cannot offer someone who is not TESOL trained or have TESOL endorsed, we have a savings of $12,000 for Eleanor's contract. We are moving to single sign-on. Out of my office, I currently pay Becky Shepard $15,000 as a data manager. The single sign-on that the technology department has worked so diligently with is going to eliminate the need for us to have an outside contract who does the student file layouts. The couple of files, NWEA map is one you have to manipulate a little bit. We can do that in-house, and that will, so as far as what could I do to help save money toward this proposal, this is all I can come up with. I do have one internal person who is TESOL endorsed, only one out of our 200 teachers. If in fact that the board would allow me to post this position internally, and if that person would be the one to take it, just giving you a figure to draw on, that figure is still cheaper than Warren County ESC. This person has been with the district 26 years. And so that would be a potential net cost of $55,343, which is a lot of money. But here's what I'm concerned about. As I have worked on our compliance documents, which is another file that I'll need to share with you later, we do not have anything on the web, currently our website, that talks about our program. We have to have a handbook. I've developed all of those, but I have to be able to say that I've got a properly endorsed teacher that's doing that. So as of this time, while all those documents are ready to be presented to you, I can't do that because I've written those documents with saying that we're in compliance, and currently we're not. So that's why I have not published those documents, but I'll be happy to share. And so while that is a very short presentation, here's where I'm at. Currently, we have done the best with it this year. We've got a wonderful tutor that has kids' best needs at heart. She takes a personal interest in them. She goes to visit them at the mosque when they're doing their dances, and she goes out when they are doing other kinds of 4-H projects and other projects. But I cannot offer someone who is not TESOL endorsed a contract moving forward with the new Ohio Department of Education's guidelines that came down in August of 2018. Questions?
And that's the big thing, is we need to be in compliance with the state. And we're not. We had a significant increase in ESL students this year. I don't think that trend will reverse itself. I think we'll continue to get more ESL students, and there is some room for that to grow into that position. So realistically, we just need to be in compliance. It's a civil rights issue that we want to make sure we're in compliance with them.
And also what I would like to be able to do, like I said, I proposed it as a full-time position. Again, with someone who worked 2 days a week, and we did expand that up to 3 days a week. We've done the best we can. But those kids, we have to show that they are growing and that they are exiting out of OELPA. We have been under the radar a bit because our in size of students has not been 20 or 25. It went to 25 this past year to be on the local report card. Now I know the report card is in a state of flux, but we are approaching the number where that's going to be a report card measure. Currently, it's too small of a subpopulation to hit the report card. But I expect for it, when the report cards come back up, to come that way. But ultimately, doing what's best for kids, having every child who's identified as not having exited the OELPA assessment with an average of 4s and 5s on that assessment. We do have 27 of those students in that position right now. And to be able, what I would like to be able to do, if we had a full-time person, is that tutor would touch every single ESL kid in our district every single week for 20 to 30 minutes of English language instruction.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Any discussion or other questions?
If it's okay with the board, I would just need then actually a motion. If you want to take all 4 of those positions, the 3 with Jim and the ESL position all at one time. But that's up to you all.
All right. Any discussion about that, or is there a motion on the table?
I'll make a motion for all 4 of them.
Oh, okay, Chris. And do we have a second?
Second.
Oh, Bob?
Yeah.
Dr. Sander, did you get that?
Yes, it's the motions by Mr. Sizemore, second by Mr. Nipper.
Yes.
Are you ready for the roll?
Yes.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfenberger,
Yes.
Parker. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, and now we'll-
find it. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wolfwater. I just wanted to know, were these positions time sensitive? They were first threes, I thought.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you, Mrs. Raleigh. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I was trying to say before the vote went, but I guess that's what happens with remote. Were they time sensitive because they were first reads this evening?
Those positions are a little bit, this is to create the, Ms. Raleigh, this is to create the position, not to actually do any hiring of those positions at this time. And it is with the SL, to be perfectly honest with you, all four of them are very difficult to fill.
Okay.
Should we go out, because we'll have to go outside definitely for at least the top two, I know.
But, you know, I'm sure that.
I apologize, I can't hear, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
Okay, I was afraid it was just me, I'm sorry.
I wonder if Mrs. Raleigh could do the same thing that Dr. Sander did? If that
Yeah,
would help.
Lori, if you want to try to connect with your phone rather than use the microphone on your device.
Can you hear me right at this minute?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
That's
that's great, yeah.
that's better. If you did want to switch, there's an arrow next to your mute button, and then you can say switch to phone audio.
An arrow next to my mute button.
Yeah, there's next to your mute button in the bottom left-hand corner.
I'm fine.
There's like a little arrow right in between mute and stop video. And then if you click that arrow one time, you'll see another menu.
Go ahead.
And then you click
Okay.
switch to phone audio.
Did she say, go ahead?
That's what I heard.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
all right. So we will move on to new business then. First up, we have an interim treasurer contract with Warren County
Lisa
ESP.
Gatto.
Yes, I'm asking for an action item on this one due to the time-sensitive issue. This is that the board approved the contract with the Warren County ESD for interim treasurer Robert Dupre. Effective, that should be March 30th of 2020, not the 26th. Should be March 30th of 2020.
Great. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'm sorry, Rachel, I had one question.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Is that open-ended on the timing? The time, it would just set a rate per 8 hours a day. So is
Yes.
that open-ended as far as the end date?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Sizemore. Anything else? Okay, chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Raleigh, is there a second?
Second,
Mr. Sizemore? Dr. Sander?
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
yes.
Mrs. Raleigh, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfmacher.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The next, this is a first read. You have with you several calendars to look at, but these are the classified and exempt calendars for the 2021 school year, and this is a first read, and I didn't know if you had any questions on that. I know this was gone over with both Mrs. Hetzler and Mrs. Faulkner, reviewed these.
Is there any discussion on that before we bring it back?
So it's okay to bring back on the 27th.
Yes.
Okay. Next is, this is also a first read. This is a change in the elementary student handbook. There are just minor changes. One is to update the board members as far as president and vice president on the cover. The new calendar on page 3 for the 2021 school year. Also, the consistency with the arrival and dismissal times for all elementary buildings, as well as including the Hampton Bennett time on page 4. The chronic illness waiver is no longer available, but we can approve that with documentation from a physician. That's described on page 5. On page 8, we added smartwatches to the list of electronic devices, since students are starting to have electronic watches in here and being able to text and so forth with that. And then finally, page 4 continues with the 2018-19 Warren County common attendance policy that all schools in Warren County uses. That has not changed, so that is still in there from 18-19. So really the bulk of the changes are from the smartwatch all the way up to just updating the cover with the change of leadership with the school board.
All right, any discussion or questions before bringing that back? All right, Dr. Sander, it looks like we can bring that back and move on with the next item.
Okay. Next is a first read for the K through 6 school fees for the 2021 school year. These fees are exactly the same as last year. There's no change on any fees.
Wow, great. That's great. Thank you.
I'll bring these back if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, the next two items I'd like to turn over to Mr. Roberts. We had the seamless summer lunch program and then the lunch fees. We do have two different changes proposed for the lunch fees. Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, the lunch fees, there are two changes. One is just the adult breakfast. Due to our audit, we found we were not in compliance with the adult breakfast. We were only charging $1, so we do have to raise that to $1.45 just for the adult breakfast. And the other one is the student cost or just the overall cost for orange juice. I believe we were charging 70 cents and it's actually 50. So we're going to drop it down to 50 cents. So that ends up being a savings there. So no additional cost for student lunches. Just the raise in the adult breakfast price and the drop in the orange juice price.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions or discussion on that? All right, then.
Okay, I'll bring those back then
Yes,
on the 27th. The next item would be first read for Blizzard bags. As you know, this is an annual event. It just gives us the option that should we have cancellation for days for weather or in this year pandemic for days 6, 7, and 8 that we could use Blizzard bags or what they're now calling distance learning for those 3 days.
All right, any questions or discussion about the Blizzard bags?
Just want to thank everyone for the effort because it's gotten way more extensive testing than I think we ever intended it for. So.
Yeah, it's next year will be easy compared to this year, I believe.
All right.
Is that
are we
okay to bring back on the 27th?
Yes.
Okay. Next is, I'm going to turn over the two community seals. Remember, with the change of graduation requirements,
Dr.
there are
Sander,
three
I
locally-
apologize, but I think we skipped seamless summer info. That was in the chat.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rodney. Basically, what was going to happen with the Seamless Summer program is that we'll be getting that in June, just as if we were in school the entire time. Our last day of school for students is the last Thursday in May, which I believe is the 27th. Mr. Roberts, you can correct me if you'd like. But the Seamless Summer would start the following Monday.
Yes.
And we will do like we did last year, where the high school will be serving breakfast. Anthony Wayne will be serving breakfast and lunch.
Yes. We will operate all lunches as is. We are right now through May 28th. So we'll shut down May 29th for the cooks to clean the kitchen, and then summer seamless, like we have in the past, would start June 5th.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about skipping that.
No, that was my fault. I apologize. Going back to H, it is the with the change in graduation requirements that was just recently passed by the General Assembly. We do have 3 local seals. Mrs. Fromm was on with the Fine Arts seal. The board approved that last month. And the next 2 seals to be discussed are the Community Service Seal and the Community Engagement Seal. Mrs. Fromm.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you have copies of those. I know I shared those with Mrs. Hetzler and Dr. Sander last week. So there are 12 total seals that students have the opportunity to earn for graduation. 9 of those are prescribed by the state. 3 of those we have the option to design locally. As Dr. Sander said, you've already approved the Fine Arts Seal. What I have for you tonight is what is called the Community Service Seal and the Student Engagement Seal. Looking at the Community Service one first. Right now, our students are required to have 20 hours of graduation or 20 hours of community service for graduation. For them to earn the seal, they have to double that. So they would be required to have 40 documented hours minimum of community service over their 4 years of high school to earn this seal. Pretty self-explanatory. We have bought an online program called Transio that we will be using next year in the athletic office to track our community service hours. Any questions about community service? That is in line with what other districts are doing. They're basically looking at their requirements for graduation and increasing it. Some are just doing a couple more hours. We felt like 40 hours, 10 hours a year was sufficient, sets the bar high without it being unrealistic. Looking at the student engagement seal, the purpose of this goal is to keep kids engaged in the school community. As we know, kids that are connected with extracurricular activities tend to have better grades, have a lower risk of dropping out, and other risk-taking behaviors. So with the student engagement seal, over the course of their 4 years of high school, they would need to be active members of 3 different organizations, clubs, or extracurricular activities. And then within those activities, they would need to participate in 3 events. So for example, if one of their activities is student government, within 1 school year of student government, they would need to be an active participant in 3 activities. And then they would log that. Right now you have a paper log just so we could get something in policy. We don't love that. Our goal is eventually to be able to track that in Naviance or in our student information system. But for now, we at least have the paper to get something in writing for next year. And those are the 2 additional local seals.
Thank you, Mrs. Fromm. Any questions about that? All right. Do we need to bring that back?
Okay, we'll bring that back on the 27th. Next, also is Mrs. Fromm for the inauguration trip proposal to Washington, D.C. Kelly?
So this is the brainchild, if you will, of some of my younger social studies teachers. Justin Rossi, Lucas George, and Zach Catris would love to take some of our students to DC in January of 21 for the inauguration of our next president. What you see there is kind of a who, what, why, where, and how proposal to maybe move forward with that in terms of starting to solicit students and fundraising. It would be a very expensive trip because we'd only be taking 1 bus, and because of the inauguration, the hotels require a 3-night minimum. when push comes to shove, we may not get enough interest, but we at least want to give kids the opportunity. Justin has worked with Classic Student Tours, which is who we've always used for our 8th grade tour. And again, this would be optional. It would be something up to the students, but they would help them fundraise if that's something they wanted to do. So it'd be about 44 students and 4 chaperones. Either Michael or I would attend. That is to be determined.
Was this open to all high school students? I think I might have missed.
No, it would be geared specifically to the kids in AP US History and AP Government. If with those 2 sects we did not have enough kids, we may open it up to like juniors in government, regular government. But the hope would be between AP Government and AP American History, we would have enough kids. Looking at the master schedule, we have 2 sections of AP Government and 1 section of AP US History. So you're looking at about 75 to 80 kids. So if half of them were able to go, we'd fill the bus.
What happens if more want
Saw
to go?
that noted on from Wayne. I get
That's where it would get tricky. I think we'd have to cap it at 1. For us to justify taking a second bus, we'd have to have close to that double amount. And I don't know if realistically that's a possibility. So the best case scenario is that we get close to that number, or it would become a waiting list. It would kind of be like a first come, first serve. If you really want to go, get your deposit in to hold your spot.
Okay.
I can ask Justin to ask Wayne how much a second bus would cost. If the board would like me to do that, I could ask Justin to get a preliminary number for that.
I mean, that might be a good idea just in case.
I can ask Justin to do that, and I'll bring that back next time just as another piece of information. And again, we're not saying definitely this will happen, because with the economy and everything happening right now, this might not be realistic for families, but we can't even fundraise without the board's permission. So we wanted to at least start the process.
You would also have the issue with needing double the chaperones, right?
Correct, correct. Right now, obviously, it would be Michael or I, and then Lucas, Justin, and Zach. And more than likely, it would be me, so there'd be a female chaperone. So I would need 3 subs.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion before that's brought back?
Kelly, I have one question. One of the notes on this page was talking about how a lot of deposits are paid up front. If this COVID-19 stuff keeps continuing, are we putting our kids at risk of losing their refund, their deposits?
That's a really good
Or
question.
their
I will
deposit?
ask Justin to follow up with that about like trip insurance, or if this is something that we could reschedule. I know a lot of schools that do their DC trips in the spring right now. That's something they're running into with what they're doing with those kids. So I will ask about Plan B for COVID-19, what that would look like, and would people get their money back?
Okay, any other questions?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fromm. All right.
Okay, next is the, I just make notes, I apologize. Next is the board policy, first read for the recommended board policies. I did share the summary with you all about a week and a half ago on that. Didn't know if there's any questions on that.
Any questions or discussion before we bring that back? All right.
No.
Okay, next, I'll turn this over to Mrs. Denisi. We've got the elementary music textbooks. That's what's up for adoption. That was offered to all K-12, but only the elementary expressed an interest. So, Mrs. Denisi?
Sure. I just thought I would share my screen just for a moment to show the textbook adoption cycle. And you'll notice that music, art, business, computer, literacy, physical education, family, consumer sciences, based on the cycle that was in place, we were supposed to take a look at those departments this year. Back in February, I conducted a focus meeting, and I invited all of the groups, PE, visual arts, music, and we had a really good roundtable. We took a look at curriculum maps and so forth, but we talked about the need for, or was there a need for, an adoption of materials. The visual art department, they are still kicking around maybe a teacher resource to give them some better ideas on projects to bring to the classroom, but there was not a need, in their opinion, for any kind of adoption of a student text or a student missile, if you will. People from the physical education health department did not attend. They opted not to attend. But this was also part of the meeting in which, if you recall, we brought to the board the Discovery Education, where we did get that free grant for STEAM and STEM with Jamie Lafferty and Matt Sloan. So that was a product of that meeting as well. So they're getting free resources. The only people that said it was really time to freshen up the student materials was the elementary music, and both Mike Milham and Kent Holland attended that. We took a look at 3 different vendors. They currently are using Silver Burdette and GIN, G-I-N-N. That was adopted, they told me, quote, sometime when Debbie Mears was the assistant superintendent. So that kind of gives you a frame of reference on when that occurred. And they talked about how the CDs are worn out and all those kinds of different things. They do like Silver Burdette and Jen, but they did look at them, Scott Forsman and McGraw Hill. Both of the gentlemen, they landed back on Silver Burdette again, the 2018 copyright version. Silver Burdette has been purchased by Pearson, so it's now under the umbrella of Pearson, but it still says as produced by Silver Burdette. So I do have the cost proposal from Pearson for that, for a 6-year adoption for all students and all buildings. Now this is where, boy, I tell you what, I would love to be able to say we've only got 2 or 3 elementary buildings, because it went by building and so, instead of so much by student. But it is a 6-year adoption to the tune of $44,000. That money has been laid aside. It could be purchased in this this year's budget with that, and that is the material. I do have them laid out in the boardroom. I would be happy to take a photo of those if you would like to see that. I will tell you, there's not a whole lot to look at from the materials that they sent. A lot for the teachers on a flash, but every single student would have books that they could learn music out of. And also with having 5 buildings worth of materials, that would prevent our vocal music people from having to transfer books from building to building. Do you have any questions for me on that?
Did you say that was 44,000?
Yes, for 6 years. That covers 6 years, grades 1 through 6.
Any questions or discussion? All right. So is that something we want to bring back?
Yes, if that's okay.
Okay.
And then if anybody wants to see materials, just shoot me an email and I can swing them by for y'all to look at.
Absolutely.
If you'd like. The next item is the board resolution. I would ask, since we are starting with the distance learning very strongly today, and it deals with all the changes with the House Bill 197, as well as the Governor DeWine's order, would ask if the board would consider action on this item. But it is the board resolution concerning the Executive Order 2020-01D concerning the changes in school for this year for the coronavirus. and I was able to get a copy to you all. I apologize, that was late arriving, but I got that to you just as soon as I got that. Exhibit A we've had for a little bit of time, just which is the distance learning plan. I would be glad to answer any questions for you.
Yeah, I think everybody has had a chance to review it. Are there any questions about that?
No.
No.
No, I'm good.
All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
Moved.
Was that Mr. Sizemore?
Mr. Nipper.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nipper. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Sizemore, Dr. Sander?
Okay, Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is personnel. And we do have, I kind of broke the first part up into two issues. One, when you look on it, well, I'll get to that part, but item A would be a first read. This is for the elementary and high school summer school. We did talk about the budgets for this at the March board meeting, and so then we posted these positions, and this is a first read for those positions should we have summer school this year. All this just kind of remains in flux. Would like to ask for consideration of the board move forward towards hiring this at the actual board meeting. Whether or not we actually use them or not yet to be seen.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sander. Any discussion on these? All right, if you want to bring those back
Yes.
for our next meeting.
Next for first read is classified sub for all areas, including the bus driver. That's Tamara Morellis.
All right, any discussion, any questions? All right, if you want to bring that back, Dr. Sander.
Okay, that sounds great. Now we get into the issue. I've kind of separated these two and would ask that the board consider action on the certified staff. It is actually a first read, but all these positions are high need. It would be Latrice Bayemer for the junior high Spanish, Christopher McLaughlin for the SLP, speech and language, Michelle Meeks for the school psych, and Rebecca Sanders with an S, and obviously the no relation, as the junior high math position for next year.
Any questions or discussion? All right, and Dr. Sander is asking for a motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Fleming, is there a second? Mrs. Raleigh? Dr. Sander?
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you. The next is a first read. This is for a sixth grade ELA position at Hunter, replacing a retiree on that one. And you've got her letter recommendation resume in case there's any questions.
Any questions or discussion? And Dr. Sander, you are asking for action on that as well, correct?
No, I
No.
can bring that back. That's not a high needs
Okay.
position. So
Okay,
that's,
thank you. I misunderstood.
no, I apologize. No, I just want to separate the high needs. Next, item E is recommendations of first read for continuing contracts for Amanda Franklin and Miranda Manis.
All right, any questions or discussions before we bring that back?
And both of them meet all the criteria necessary for continuing contract.
All right, we can bring that back, Dr. Sander.
Okay, thank you. This next item is a cleanup item, and it's a first read. This is for Daniel Watts, as a junior high assistant wrestling coach who did provide that service to us during the winter wrestling season, and was inadvertently not recommended by the activities director. So I wanted to clean up that one. And it's just a first read.
Any discussion or questions?
Nope.
All right, if you want to bring that back, Dr. Sander.
Okay. Then, since Mr. Dufresne is not with us, I wanted to go through the treasurer's presentation. There are two donations. One is to Penny Royal in the amount of $156.26 from the St. Francis Episcopal Church, and that's to help cover some school lunch fees. And the second one is a $25 donation to Skank Elementary from the American Income and Life Insurance Company. And that's just for use by the principal somewhere for the kids.
Any discussion or
And these are
questions?
just first read.
Oh. All right, I think we can bring that back, Dr. Sander.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next up, looks like we've got an executive session. Or do we want to do board member comments first?
That usually comes first, is the board
Yes,
member
okay, we've
comment.
got that first. I kind of skipped ahead. Sorry about that. All right, if we want to start with Mr. Nipper for board member comments.
Yeah, just real quick, Roddy, thanks to you and your staff and whoever else is doing all the meals. I mean, nothing but great response to that. Appreciate that. Dr. Sanders and Robin and Jim, thanks for everything you guys are doing, your presentation. And Amy and Craig, thanks for putting on the Zoom. It's actually worked pretty well and it's kind of neat. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nipper. And next up, Mrs. Raleigh.
Nah,
All right, Mr. Sizemore.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending and bearing with us here as we work through some of the bugs of the first time trying this way, but it's good that we're still able to conduct our business and take care of things that we need to and fill some much needed positions, especially ones with high demand. So thank you everyone for all the time put into making this work.
Thank you. And Mr. Fleming.
The only thing I have is if anyone's watching on the live feed to remember to fill out your survey for the building.
yeah.
Opportunity to get some community feedback on the ideas the community advisory team has put together. That's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fleming. I just want to echo what Mr. Nipper already said. Oh, sorry, I want to thank the administration for keeping up with all of the changes that have been coming down and making them into a digestible form for us and the staff. I know that can't be easy and have to be keeping you up at night, and we appreciate that. Not that it's keeping you up, but the effort. I want to thank also our staff for working to adapt to all of these changes. I know they're working very hard, trying to make sure that our kids continue to learn. I know just my own experience that we've had a lot of teachers putting out, additional work, even required, just to try to keep kids where they need to be and not get that backslide, even though it's not summer yet, but we're kind of getting close to that. So also classified staff and Mr. Roberts taking care of the lunches and making sure that our kids and community are fed. Thank you so much. And the tech team, thank you for making this work and also taking on everything that has come up with respect to making sure that kids can learn from home, that teachers know how to use the technology, and parents as well. And so I appreciate that. Thank you. Now we have an executive session for purposes of discussing the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, or demotion or compensation of an employee or an official, otherwise known as personnel. Is there a motion to adjourn into executive session?
Rachel, I make a motion, but also I forgot, I wanted to thank Mr. Richter for joining us. I see him down there at the bottom. So,
Oh,
I make a motion to go in executive session.
all right. And just to clarify, that is with no action to follow. All right. And so there's a
Okay.
motion by Mr. Nipper. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Sizemore.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right. Dr.
Mr.
Sanders?
Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Mrs.
Yeah.
Raleigh?
okay, I heard you. I got you there. It's just a delay. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that is at, I've got 7:36. If you'll just give me a couple of minutes to switch over to the executive session. Once I log in, I'll have to admit the board members to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Did
Thank
we
you.
all do the phone and audio for that?
I'll try.
I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody in this
Can you hear
meeting.
me right
Yes, I can.
I would, Mr. Sizemore. I would, Mr. Sizemore.
Okay.
Okay. I've got to get out of here. Okay, leaving the meeting.
Oh. We're waiting for Lori. Let's see. All right, I think we have everybody on now. All right, so we're now out of executive session, and now we're ready for adjournment of the meeting. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Olive?
Moved.
Second, Mr. Fleming? Dr. Sander, you're muted.
Okay, just a
Oh, there you
second. Okay, thank you. This is to come out of executive session. I got a motion by Mr. Raleigh, second by Mr. Fleming. Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Ms. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Okay. And then motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Mr. Nipper,
Second.
second. Mr. Sizemore?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes. I
Mr.
got a
Fleming?
pee.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Oh,
You
he's
gotta take
making
that
it
away,
away.
me.
She
Mrs.
can, it's
Ms.
live.
Wolfenbarger?
Yes.
Okay, and that is 8:43.